In the Discord thread for this European trip, there had been several discussions about potentially visiting Auschwitz while in southern Poland. While I completely understand the hesitation some have in going to such a place, especially while on a trip that's largely focused on riding different roller coasters, for me personally, I felt that the importance of visiting such places outweighed these concerns, especially since I've been to places that focus on the darker side of history during similar trips, such as the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile or the Apartheid Museum in South Africa. I also don't know for certain if I'll have a chance to come back to this area again in the future, so I felt that I should go while the opportunity was there. As Larson made his way back toward Krakow, Ricky, Tyler, and I went over to Auschwitz. When we arrived to Auschwitz I, the work camp that had been converted into a museum, we found out that this site is only open to tour groups during most of the day, and doesn't open to the general public until later in the afternoon. So we decided to come back after heading over to Auschwitz-Birkenau, which was the larger death camp site. As we walked around the compound, this was one of the most surreal experiences I've had in my life. And even though it was a bright sunny day, it was still a very haunting experience. The compound is incredibly large, and it can easily take multiple hours to see each of the signboards at different sites. We entered through the front, where trains would pass through what was known as the Gate of Death. Our approach was a bit of a reverse of what I believe most tour groups do when stopping here, since we went to the right of the train tracks to the barracks first. While some of the barracks were used as toilet houses or for other purposes, those which were used to house prisoners would hold upward of 400 people each. And there were 18 of these barracks in the first row. But then you look behind them, and you see the chimneys of those which were no longer standing, which came out to another 8 rows worth. Add in the barracks that were on the other side of the tracks, as well as those which had been part of an incomplete expansion, and you really get the sense of the scale of this place. Seeing this was when the whole thing really began to hit me. You hear the number 6 million, and you know it's a lot, but you might have a hard time really fathoming just how large an operation it was, and begin to think of the sheer amount of people who could have been here at one time while this atrocity was occurring. As we continued to the back of the complex, we saw a combination of former SS Guard building sites and where they planned to expand the complex before the fall of the Nazis in World War II. This walk toward the back further emphasized how huge this place was. As we came to the back corner, the haunting feeling of Birkenau really took hold, as we found ourselves in a wooded area where many victims were forced to undress before being sent into one of the smaller gas chambers. A bit further down that path was a pile of rubble, which was Crematorium No. 5. The signage indicates how the building was laid out and where the gas chambers and incinerators were located. You could see some of the incinerator structure that had been left behind from when the SS destroyed the building to try and hide the evidence of these crimes. While many victims were cremated in the incinerators, some were simply placed into large burn piles out in the open, such as those that happened in this meadow. The nearby Crematorium IV was one that was destroyed before the fall of Nazi Germany, as a group of Jewish prisoners who moved bodies from the gas chamber to the incinerators in this building led the only armed revolt to occur in Auschwitz, leading to the fall of this building. Those who took part in this revolt, though, would be murdered by the SS in retaliation. As we continued along the far side of the complex, we came to the building where thousands went through preliminary processing if they were going to remain in the camp for any period of time. Inside this building, the prisoners had their clothes and possessions taken, their hair shaved off, made to go through disinfecting and showering, then issued their camp uniform. Clothing taken from them would be disinfected and redistributed to people back in Germany. Because of the prevalence of epidemics in the camps, some prisoners would go through this building on multiple occasions, and in some cases were waiting outside of the building for over 12 hours in the harshest weather conditions. In the last room of this building, there's a large display with photos of many who perished in this camp, including some individual photos and family photo collections. As we made it to the far end of the railroad tracks, we found the location of the Auschwitz Memorial, which can be found near the sites of Crematoriums I and II. Walking this path alongside the track was another very haunting moment because of the realization that this is where so many people took their last steps toward the gas chambers where they were murdered. Because of plans to meet up with others who were arriving to Krakow later in the day, we only had a limited amount of time left, but we did head back to the work camp that was Auschwitz I. Getting into the main part of this complex requires visitors to pass under the notorious gate that reads Arbeit macht frei, meaning work sets you free. Much of this complex remains intact, unlike a lot of the buildings in Birkenau which were destroyed. As you roam the complex, there are reminders of the horrors that were faced here, from railings that were used for hangings, locations where corpses were displayed to intimidate prisoners, and an alleyway outside of Block 11 where beatings and firing squad executions of political prisoners were conducted. Block 11 was known as the Death Block because of those executions. The basement of this building also saw the experimentation by the SS in the use of Zyklon B for gas chambers before being utilized at various death camps. There also remained a munition bunker that was converted into a large gas chamber and crematorium for the work camp, with a similar layout to those that were built in Birkenau. To see these two locations was truly a surreal experience, and as mentioned before, I do understand the hesitation that some may have in coming to a place like this because of the atrocious actions that were taken here. However, I would still encourage anyone to make a point of including places like this in their travel plans. They serve an incredibly important purpose of offering those who have not experienced such horrors to reflect and hopefully take part in ensuring that such evil is never allowed to occur again.